Hi and welcome to Swedish Plantguys. In this video we will show you a repot of a windmill palm that is literally crawling out of his pot. So what we will be using for this repot is of course a new pot, and we have a bigger pot here. It doesn't have to be bigger than the one we're using right now because we're actually going to prune off some of the roots. So we could repot in the same pot again. However, we want to use a slightly larger pot just to make sure that we don't have to do this procedure very often. So that we can probably wait maybe 3 or 4 years before we have to do a repot again. We also need a power drill to make some holes in this big pot because it doesn't have any holes, so we have to make sure that we have a way for the water to get out. We have drainage. I need something to measure where to make those holes in the pot with, and we will need a saw to be able to cut those roots. Make sure that the saw you use is cleaned because otherwise you could transfer bacteria or fungus to those roots and you don't want that. It has been standing in a mixture of pumice and clay. We call it pure pumice, but there are a mixture of pumice and clay, and we will be planting it in the same type of pumice that we have here. And of course, never ever forget to use gloves when repotting a palm because they have very, very sharp leaves. So now we're going to try and get this windmill palm out of its current pot. And for this, of course, I will be needing some help. So now we can see the extent of this massive root system. There are literally roots in the entire pot. And the reason that we have this crevice in here is actually because in the bottom of this pot you have this raised surface. So it's not the roots that have been doing this. There just haven't been any room for the roots right here. But the reason it looks like this is because of the pumice. Now the pumice has an ability to be able to grow the roots 4 times quicker than in standard planting soil. Now if you want to know more about pumice and how it actually works, we have a video you can go and watch. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to reduce some of these roots here and never ever take away more than 1/3 of the roots because that could potentially injure the plant. Now what we're going to do here is that we're only going to take away roots from the bottom. So we're going to saw off some of the roots here. Now since we have a larger, wider pot, we do not have to go in and take away anything on the sides. But if I wanted to repot this into the same pot again, then I could also cut off some of the roots from the sides to make it a little bit smaller so that we could get some new pumice inside of this pot as well. So once again, when using a saw, make sure that you've cleaned this so that you're not transferring any bacteria or fungus to the roots here. That's really, really important. Otherwise, in this case, we're actually going to take away all of those roots that we have that is coming out from this crevice here. So we'll just start sawing. So I know a lot of you is probably wondering, are we harming the plant by doing this? Because it looks quite fierce here. But no, we're not. When we have repotted this, what is going to happen is that new roots are going to start to form here quite quickly. And those new small roots are actually the Rolls Royce of roots. They're going to suck up a lot of water, a lot of nutrients, and the plant is actually going to get a boost from doing this. It's actually going to thrive. So now it's getting time to put this root ball into the new pot. Now that won't be a problem since the root ball is smaller than the new pot here. But we have a problem, and that problem is that this pot doesn't have any holes, so it doesn't have any way to let out the water. And if we place this outside when it's raining, it will fill up with water and the plant will die. So we have to have some drainage holes. Now there are two ways of doing this. One way is we could drill some holes in the bottom of the pot here. What will happen then is that when we water, all the excess water will go out of the pot. That's fine. However, that will mean that we'll have to water quite often. So what we could do if we have the holes in the bottom is that I could take, for instance, one of these plastic pots here or a bucket of some sort, cut it down, place it in the bottom of this pot and make a water reservoir. When that water reservoir fills up, the water goes over the top of the water reservoir and then out of the bottom of the pot. We have a water reservoir and we don't have to water as often. If you want to know how to create this, we actually have a video on how to use pumice for outdoors you can go and watch. But I'm not going to do that with this pot. What I'm actually going to do is that I'm going to drill some holes a couple of inches or a couple of centimeters above the sides here. Now what will happen is that all of the bottom of the pot will be a water reservoir. So we get even more water in the reservoir. But when that fills up to where the holes are, the excess water will go out. There is one big disadvantage with this. We are in Sweden and we get cold winters. So if we have a lot of water standing in that reservoir in wintertime when it freezes, what could happen is that when that water freezes, the pot could actually crack. But I know that I keep my palms quite dry in wintertime when it's that cold, so it will probably not be a problem for me. But know that that is a big problem if you have a large water reservoir in the entire pot. So the first thing we will do now is that we will measure how large is our root ball here. And I can see that it's about 35 centimeters. And if we take those 35 centimeters and put it down into the pot, we arrive somewhere here. So when we plant this in this pot, the root ball will actually stop here. And that is a perfect indication of where we want our water reservoir. Because if we make the holes right about here, that means that when I water this after I've repotted it, the roots will never be standing in water because the water reservoir is actually underneath the root ball. Those new roots will actually get used to living in that water all the time. So we're not harming the root ball, we're not harming the plant, and we're actually creating new roots that are going to live in that water reservoir. So I will make those holes and I will make sure that the holes are beneath that root ball. There, now the material of this pot is actually a form of plastic, so it's not a problem just drilling a hole in it. So make sure that you know what type of pot you have so you're not cracking the pot by drilling in it. So I know a lot of you are thinking, won't the pumice fall out of these holes? Well, we're actually using quite a small drill here, so it's not a problem. They will never fall out from these holes. But make sure not to use too large holes because then it will fall out. So now it's time to make the repot. So first of all, we will fill up with some pumice in the bottom of the pot and we will stop around where we know that the holes are because they are in the same vicinity as the root ball here. So I'll start by filling up with pumice. There, now the bottom of this is completely filled with pumice up to where the point of the holes are. So now I'll actually need some help again by placing the plant inside of the pot. Now when you've placed it inside of the pot, make sure that you have the stem straight up so it's not tilted, or just walk around the pot and make sure that it's straight. So now you just fill up with pumice around the root ball here, all the way up, and fill some pumice on top as well. You never want to put too much pumice or soil, whatever you're using as a substrate, up onto the stem here, because then the stem could potentially start to rot when that substrate is getting moist. So make sure that you are using around the same level as before, so you're not adding anything up to the stem. Now we're actually using new pumice here, and we could reuse the pumice that we had in the other container. However, there weren't any to reuse because all of the pumice were inside of this big root ball. But you could reuse the pumice, and that is one of the advantages of pumice. So now we are finished with the repot. Next step is of course to give it some water. But before we do that, I actually want to do another thing with this windmill palm. Now, I have never pruned this palm. I've had it since it was a little baby with a stem not thicker than, let's say, 1 inch. And during all of that time, I have never pruned it. This was actually pruned before I got this palm here. But I'm going to do that now. Now the reason why I haven't pruned any of the leaves off, even if they look something like this, is that they are still photosynthesizing. The more leaves we have on this palm, the more solar panels we have, the more water and nutrients are going to move up and down the stem, the more it will create sugars and starches, which are the food for the plant. Now we have a video where you can watch that tells you how you can get bigger and thicker plants. So you can go and watch that. But the main thing here is that by not removing all of these leaves, I've actually made sure that the stem has gotten thicker without it getting very, very tall. So we have a really, really nice and thick stem, but not a tall plant. And that's really important to me because I can't have this too tall to be able to store it inside over winter. But I think the stem is thick enough now, and we've just made this nice repot here. So I'm going to prune off some of the lower leaves here because now I don't want the stem to become much thicker. So this was a repot of a windmill palm that was literally crawling out of its pot. And one of the reasons it has this nice thick root system is because it was planted in pumice. Now if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. That really helps our channel a lot. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do. Hit the bell as well so you get a notification every time we put up something new. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram where you can get sneak previews on upcoming videos and sometimes a little bit more. Now until next time, hej då!